At 36, Ethan James had finally arrived at the place he had spent more than a decade chasing. After years of grueling deadlines, office politics, and corporate pitch meetings that dragged late into the night, he'd been promoted to creative director at one of the most prestigious marketing agencies in Los Angeles. The moment his boss shook his hand and said, "You earned this," Ethan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It wasn't just about the title or the corner office, it was about validation. Recognition that the long nights, the cancelled vacations, and the missed birthdays had meant something. He took a deep breath in that new office, overlooking the glimmer of city lights stretching toward the Pacific. And as he exhaled, one name came to mind: Samantha. Samantha Lee had been his partner through it all. She had seen him at his lowest, picked up takeout on his busiest nights, and reminded him who he was when self-doubt threatened to take over. She was smart, graceful, and quietly fierce, the kind of woman who didn't ask for attention but always commanded it. They had met through a mutual friend during a panel event 3 years ago and had been inseparable ever since. So with a full heart and a solid bank account, Ethan knew it was time. He booked a weekend at a quiet resort in Lake Tahoe, nothing extravagant, just a cozy lodge surrounded by snow-capped pines and the kind of silence that helped the soul breathe. On the second night, after dinner by a crackling fireplace, he knelt in front of the woman who had been his home long before he had a title on the door. "Samantha," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of nerves in his chest, "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, not because it's convenient, but because you are who I want beside me when everything else fades." She said yes, tears, laughter, and all. The next few days were pure joy. They called friends, shared the news on social media, and began discussing plans. They agreed on something important right away: the wedding would be simple, elegant, and shared. No family politics. No grand spectacles. No unnecessary extravagance. Both would contribute financially and emotionally equally. They were partners. At least, that's what Ethan believed. But then came the first dinner with her parents, a formal, polite gathering at a high-end Cantonese restaurant in Pasadena. Samantha's father was quiet but kind, content to smile through courses and nod respectfully. Her mother, Mrs. Evelyn Lee, on the other hand, was more reserved. Sharp eyes. Sharp voice. The kind of woman who measured people by posture and wine preference. Still, Ethan thought it went well until dessert. With a casual grace and a sip of oolong tea, Evelyn turned to Ethan and asked, "So, have you begun preparing your dowry package yet?" Ethan nearly choked on his spoonful of mango pudding. "Excuse me?" he asked, unsure if he had misheard. She smiled as if explaining to a child. The dowry. A traditional show of gratitude to the bride's family. It doesn't need to be excessive, of course. But it should reflect sincerity. Before he could process what that meant, she pulled out a folded piece of paper, a list. Ethan stared at it. He hadn't expected this. Not after agreeing with Samantha to split the costs. Not after the understanding that this marriage would be about unity, not transactions. Not after everything they had shared. He didn't say anything that night. But something had shifted, like a breeze becoming wind. And deep in his gut, Ethan knew. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. That night, back at their apartment, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed with the piece of paper Evelyn had handed him still folded in his hand. Samantha came out of the bathroom in her pajamas, drying her face with a towel, and paused when she saw his expression. He didn't speak immediately. He unfolded the list. Neat columns. Categories. A spreadsheet printed and folded with precision, like this had been planned. At the top, it read: Dowry proposal, groom's contribution to bride's family. $20,000 cash to help the bride's parents transition emotionally and financially. A luxury handbag, Chanel or Dior, nothing seasonal. A gold bangle set in jade necklace for her mother. One Apple MacBook Pro for her father to replace his old laptop. A designer tea set for the bride's grandmother. Optional, a new sedan, if feasible, something practical like a Lexus. Ethan let out a short, stunned laugh. Is this a wedding or a product launch? Samantha winced. She doesn't mean it like that. You've got to be kidding me. This isn't a suggestion, it's an invoice. I know how it looks. But this is how she grew up. In her generation, dowry gifts were normal. This is not a gift. This is a bill. Samantha sat beside him, visibly torn. Look, I didn't expect her to bring it up tonight. But you know how my mom is. She believes in formalities. She sees it as honoring the family. But what about us? What about the fact that we both agreed split costs, no over-the-top traditions, no hierarchy? Now she wants me to pay her to marry you? She's not asking for herself. She's trying to save face in front of her extended family. It's cultural. If we don't offer something, she'll lose credibility. Ethan stood, pacing. This isn't about culture. It's about control. She's testing how much she can pull the strings. Samantha stayed silent for a beat too long. That was the first moment Ethan felt a shift. Not in her love, but in her loyalty. She wasn't standing beside him. Not yet. The next day, he received a follow-up email from Evelyn. She had attached a revised gift summary with suggested price ranges and links to online product listings, just in case he needed help sourcing the items. The tone was polite, almost corporate, as if she were negotiating a deal. She even ended with, "Let me know if you need clarification or would like to propose substitutions. We're flexible within reason." Within reason. Ethan read that line over and over again. That evening, he spoke with his own parents over dinner. His mother, a retired schoolteacher, was horrified. "I raised you to respect women, not by their family's approval," she said flatly. His father, a former Navy man, took a long sip of tea, then spoke with quiet steel. "You sure this woman's marrying you, son? Or is she marrying into a transaction?" Ethan didn't have an answer. Not yet. The week that followed was tense. Samantha avoided the topic whenever he brought it up, brushing it aside with, "Let's not let my mom ruin our engagement, okay? We'll work it out." But working it out never came. Instead, Evelyn started calling his office line directly, asking if he had had time to begin the gift arrangements. She even dropped by his workplace once, pretending to be dropping off lunch for Samantha, who didn't even work there, just to chat with the receptionist and casually mention the upcoming dowry. It was embarrassing, calculated, and completely over the line. What made it worse was that Samantha still wouldn't confront her mother. One night, Ethan stared at the wedding budget spreadsheet on his laptop. Their planned expenses were already high: the venue, the catering, photography, attire, travel for family flying in. The added dowry would push him close to financial strain. But worse than the money was the principle. If he agreed to this, what would come next? Would Evelyn dictate where they lived? How they raised their children? Who visited for holidays? Would Samantha ever push back? He closed the spreadsheet and sat in the dark for a long time. He had waited his whole life to marry someone he truly loved. But now, standing at the threshold of that life, he wondered if he was being asked to sacrifice too much of himself just to get through the door. Ethan began to dread coming home. It used to be his refuge, the warm glow of pendant lights in the kitchen, the soft jazz Samantha loved playing while cooking, her voice humming along as he dropped his keys onto the counter and exhaled the stress of the day. Now, it felt like walking into a courtroom. Every silence was tense. Every sentence measured. And every glance from Samantha held something between guilt and avoidance. They were still going through the motions, talking about florists and music playlists and invitations. But it all felt forced. Shallow. Like putting up wallpaper over cracks in the wall. And those cracks were growing deeper. One night, Ethan came home later than usual. His team had been pitching a new campaign to a client in San Diego, and the presentation had run over. When he walked through the door, he found Samantha sitting at the dining table with her laptop open and a glass of white wine in her hand. She didn't look up. "Hey," he said, setting his briefcase down. "Hey," she replied, eyes still on the screen. He loosened his tie and poured himself some water. How'd it go with the photographer? She's fine with pushing the shoot back a week. Mom wanted more time to coordinate her outfit. Ethan blinked. Her outfit? It's our engagement shoot. She just wants to look presentable. He let out a short breath. It's not her wedding, Sam. That was the first time Samantha slammed her laptop shut in front of him. Why do you always have to frame it like it's her versus you? She's just trying to be involved. Involved, he scoffed. She's hijacking the entire process. The venue, the guest list, the gifts. Now she wants a role in the photos too? What's next, walking you down the aisle? You're being dramatic. No. I'm being realistic. And I'm wondering why you're so afraid to tell your mother the word no. Samantha stood, eyes flashing. Because I can't, Ethan. You think it's that simple? You've never had to grow up with someone like her. You don't know what it's like to carry the weight of expectations from the moment you could walk. I'm not asking you to disrespect her. I'm asking you to choose us. Samantha didn't respond. She just turned and walked into the bedroom, leaving the door halfway open, as if to say, you're free to follow, or not. The next morning, Ethan found himself sitting in the empty break room at work, staring into his coffee. His friend and co-worker, Marcus, walked in, paused, and raised an eyebrow. You look like someone just canceled your honeymoon. Ethan managed a tired smile. Feels about right. They talked for a bit. Ethan gave him the rundown, the dowry demands, the endless emails, the lack of boundaries, the growing distance between him and Samantha. Marcus listened, then finally said, I know this might sound harsh, man, but is this the kind of marriage you want? One where you're negotiating your worth from day one? Ethan didn't answer. Not right away. Because that question had been haunting him for days, and he didn't like the answer forming in the back of his mind. Later that week, things took another turn. Ethan's mother called him. I got a visit, she said. From who? From Evelyn. Ethan's stomach dropped. She brought a gift basket. Said it was a gesture of unity. Then she spent 30 minutes explaining how family traditions are important, and how our side should consider contributing more. She even brought up the car again. Mom, I'm so sorry. She had no right. I told her, his mom said firmly, that my son is not a bargaining chip. And if Samantha truly loved you, she would never allow this to happen. Ethan swallowed hard. She does love me. I think she just doesn't know how to stop it. Then you need to decide whether you want to spend the rest of your life with someone who won't fight for you. That night, Ethan sat alone in the living room, watching the glow of the TV flicker against the walls without registering what was on. He loved Samantha. He wanted to marry her. But right now, he didn't feel like he was marrying her. He felt like he was marrying her mother's approval. And that was something he could never truly win. The days blurred together. Ethan buried himself in work, staying later than usual, volunteering for client calls, anything to avoid the suffocating atmosphere at home. What used to be a haven had become a place where he felt judged, outnumbered, and worst of all, alone. Meanwhile, Samantha continued planning the wedding with her mother. Ethan was included only in name. Choices were made without him, emails were forwarded too late, and when he voiced concerns, they were dismissed as overreactions. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was held at an upscale Korean fusion restaurant Samantha's mother had chosen, no surprise. Ethan's parents weren't thrilled but agreed to attend, hoping to keep the peace. His father even wore a tie, which Ethan hadn't seen him do in years. When they arrived, the seating chart was already arranged. Ethan and Samantha sat at the center table, flanked by Evelyn on one side and her friends on the other. Ethan's parents? Tucked away at a corner table near the kitchen, barely within view. Ethan's jaw clenched. He walked over and politely asked Evelyn if the seating was a mistake. She smiled without warmth. I just thought the bride's family should be front and center. It's how we do things. So the groom's family gets shoved into the shadows? Oh, come now, Ethan. Must you always look for conflict? Ethan looked at Samantha, expecting, hoping, she'd say something. She didn't. She smiled weakly and took a sip of her wine, pretending not to hear. Later that night, after his parents had quietly excused themselves and guests had started leaving, Ethan pulled Samantha aside. They stood in the parking lot, under a pool of golden light cast by a flickering street lamp. I can't do this, Ethan said quietly. Samantha's eyes widened. What? This? Us? Not like this. Ethan. Your mother humiliated my parents tonight. She's hijacked this wedding. She's turned our engagement into a negotiation. And every time I try to stand up, you disappear. Samantha's face crumpled. I'm trying to keep everything from falling apart. And in doing that, you're letting me fall apart. Silence. A car drove by, and they both flinched slightly from the breeze it kicked up. Finally, Samantha whispered, Do you still want to marry me? Ethan looked at her for a long moment. I want to marry you, he said. But right now, you're not standing beside me. You're standing behind her. The words landed like stone between them. Samantha wiped her cheek, her voice barely audible. So what are you saying? I think we need to pause the wedding. The fallout was swift. Evelyn called the next morning, livid. She accused Ethan of being ungrateful, of embarrassing the Lee family, of disrespecting tradition. She said Samantha had spent months preparing, and now it was all wasted because of a man's pride. Ethan said nothing. He let her speak, then hung up the phone. His mother hugged him later that afternoon. No words. Just quiet strength. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like himself again. Not someone's puppet. Not a groom-shaped wallet. Just a man who remembered what self-respect felt like. Samantha moved in with her cousin temporarily, saying she needed space. Ethan didn't fight it. He needed it too. The wedding venue was cancelled. The deposits forfeited. But something deeper was restored. Ethan's voice. His boundaries. His worth. 2 months passed. The wedding that was supposed to happen in mid-April came and went like a ghost date on the calendar. Ethan kept the day open on purpose, not because he was holding out hope, but because he needed to feel the silence. He needed to sit with the absence of what could have been, and remember why he had walked away. He still hadn't spoken to Samantha beyond a few brief texts, polite, cautious, transactional. She hadn't come by to pick up the last of her things. He didn't push. During those 2 months, Ethan rediscovered parts of himself he didn't realize he had given up. He reconnected with friends. Spent Sundays at his parents' house, helping his dad garden and listening to his mother talk about books she was reading. He started running again, something he had stopped doing during the chaos of wedding planning. He breathed again. Not deeply. Not fully. But better than before. Then, one Saturday afternoon in late May, Samantha called. Her voice was quiet but clear. Can we talk? They met at a park, the same one where they had once spent an afternoon arguing over what breed of dog to get someday. It was peaceful now, with kids playing nearby and cherry blossoms floating lazily through the air. Samantha looked different. Lighter somehow. As if she too had shed something heavy. She sat beside him on the bench and didn't speak right away. Just stared at her hands, folded in her lap. I owe you an apology, she said finally. Ethan let the silence linger before responding. For what? For not standing up for you. For letting my mother control everything. For making you feel like a guest at your own wedding. He nodded, slowly. I've spent my whole life being her daughter, she continued. Obeying. Pleasing. Compromising. I didn't realize until I almost lost you that I never really chose myself in anything. Not in school, not in work, not even in love. Ethan looked at her. And what do you choose now? She met his eyes. You. but only if we start over. On our terms. No lists. No demands. Just two people building something we both believe in. It wasn't dramatic. There was no tearful embrace. Just two grown adults acknowledging the wreckage and considering whether it was worth rebuilding. Ethan took her hand. It has to be different. It will be, she said. In the weeks that followed, they didn't rush. No wedding plans. No announcements. Just slow mornings, honest conversations, and mutual therapy sessions where they unlearned years of inherited pressure. Eventually, Samantha sat down with her mother. Alone. No Ethan to protect her, no excuses to hide behind. And for the first time in her life, she said, "No. It didn't go well." Evelyn was furious. Accused Samantha of betrayal. But this time, Samantha didn't flinch. She walked away not from her family, but from a system that had suffocated her voice. And that, more than any ring or promise, is what brought Ethan back. 1 year later, they married. In a small ceremony on the Oregon coast, just 25 people, the ones who mattered. No dowry. No drama. Just waves, vows, and a quiet vow between them. No one else gets to write our story. As Ethan watched his bride walk down the aisle, wind in her hair, he realized he wasn't just marrying someone he loved, he was marrying someone who had fought to love him right. And in that moment, he knew. Respect isn't a luxury. It's the foundation. And love, when it's real, doesn't come with conditions, only choice.